Have you ever been to the coast and seen a boat that looks like this? Covered in barnacles and green slime and seaweed, and looking like it really needs a new coat of paint? All of these unwanted marine dwellers can be grouped together and called biofouling, and they cause serious problems for the marine industry. This biofouling can lead to up to 50% increase in fuel consumption because they make the boats less streamlined in the water. And these attached organisms are basically hitchhikers. They can go anywhere in the world attached to these boats, and then they or their offspring can become an invasive species that damage local wildlife and ecosystems. But maybe you're thinking to yourself, I haven't seen this. The boats I've looked at look totally clean. Well, the boats that you were looking at were probably coated with chemical paint, one that kills anything that sticks to it. Bad news for that unlucky homemaker, but they're not the only ones that suffer. You see, the chemicals don't just affect things that stick to the boats, but they shed, and when they accumulate in the seabed, they're killing creatures there too. So you might be thinking, well, what can we do? We need to keep our ships clean, but surely there's a better way than killing everything. The answer might lie in a new type of surface called a LIS, a liquid infused surface. I've got a picture of it just here. It's a surface that has two distinct layers. A bottom layer that's made of very small particles, and they form a porous layer, and then a layer of oil on the top of that. This oil infuses the porous layer and it gets trapped there, but the important thing is that it coats the surface and leaves a thin layer on the top. So how will this surface help? It's all in that layer of oil that sits on the top. The oil can still flow very slowly, but it wants to stay in contact with the surface. So if something wants to touch the surface underneath, it just can't. It's like if you're in a swimming pool with your floating bed. Can you get that bed to stay in the same place forever? Or will it float around all over the place? It's exactly the same for those marine dwellers. They'd really like to settle on the surface, but they can't find anything to stick to. And so your boat stays squeaky clean. I'm making and studying these surfaces, and in particular, I've been looking at how these surfaces stop working. I make them and put them in salt solutions and then expose them to energy waves, like the ones you might find in the ocean, and then examine them and find out how the oil has been lost. I found two main ways. The first, the water pushes against the surface and it can expose that surface underneath, and that causes it to degrade, which speeds up the oil loss. I also found that small droplets of water were forcing their way into that oil layer and further working to force away the oil from the surface. This becomes a vicious cycle because the more the surface gets damaged, the faster it loses oil, and the faster it loses the oil, the less the oil can protect it. My research suggests that whatever surface we have underneath, it's got to be stable when water comes into contact with it for short periods of time and not get damaged, because if it gets damaged, it might not be so good at stopping all those opportunistic marine dwellers from making it home.